Viewers, this is Apurva Singh and I hope you are doing good at home and staying safe. Today in this video I have come up with my favorite poem, that is Cold Within, written by James Patrick Kinney. So James Patrick Kinney is an American poet. He has written this poem during 1960s. The poem is a sort of a parable, and this parable has a very strong message for all of us. Cold within refers to the lack of feelings for others. It refers to cruelty, it refers to indifference, hatred, and so forth. The poet conveys the idea that we must tolerate, if not love, we must tolerate each other. We should be kind and generous towards our fellow human beings. We should not allow religion, color, caste, creed, race, class, or any other prejudices to make us mean, selfish, greedy, and self-destructive. So these are the underlining themes of the poem, which are being shown by the lines of the poet. The another important theme of the poem is that the life of men which is led by them is sinful. The sinful life led by men. How sinful life led by men is portrayed here in the poem, we'll be seeing by the actions, the selfish actions of all these 6 men who are trapped in a cold and bitter environment. So the poem does not use any fancy language. There is no meandering metaphor being used here. So the language is very colloquial and it is very easy to understand. The poem basically talks about the coldness which is there in the hearts of all human beings in the 21st century. That is why it is relevant even today, though written in 1960s. And we are reading it today. So let us see that what the poet has to say. So cold within is a kind of a metaphor of the lack of warmth in our own hearts for each other. So it is a metaphor, the title itself is a metaphor here, and when we conclude the poem, we'll understand that the title of the poem is very apt and it is very relevant. So moving ahead. So the opening of the poem is in a dramatic tone. It is in a narrative and a dramatic tone. The poet here is telling us the story of the 6 men and how these 6 men, by their selfish action, led their own destruction and they were led to the tragic death. 6 humans trapped by happenstance. So the poet here is using the word human and not people as to refer all the human beings. He is not individualizing the men who are there in the poem, rather he is talking about the mankind. The rhyming scheme used here is ABCB. The rhyming scheme is ABCB. So these 6 men, they were trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. So it is giving us a visual imagery, the bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. So all these men, they were holding a stick of wood in their hand, and this is what the story is being told about by the poet to his readers. The dying fire in need of log. So they were sitting on the side of the fire, and the fire was in need of what? In the need of log, because the fire was now dying and that stick would give it life. But the first one held hers back. So the first lady who was there, she held her log back. For of the faces round the fire, she noticed one was black. So in the light of the fire, she could see that one of the men sitting there was black in color. And she could not convince herself to give that stick to save the life of that black man. So here, what is she stopped by? She is stopped by the racial prejudice which is there in her mind. The next man, now he is the second man. The next man, looking across the way, saw one not of his church. So the next man, he saw that one of the men among the 6 was not from his church, and could not bring himself to bring the fire his stick of birch. So he could not convince himself to give away that stick in his hand to save the man who did not belong to his church, to his religion. So he could not persuade himself, he could not convince himself to give away the stick to help the man of other religion. So here he was suffering from intolerance. Religious discrimination and intolerance is highlighted here. The third man. The third one sat in tattered clothes. Tattered clothes means that he was sitting in all torn clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. So this hitch was symbolic of his meanness. Why should his log be put to use to warm the ideal rich? So he was a poor man and he could see in the light of the fire that there was a rich man. And he started to question his own self that why should he give that log of stick just to help the rich man who was sitting there. So here the poet has highlighted the class distinction, and the poor man shows that he could not persuade himself to give the only thing which he had in his hand just to save the rich man. So it also talks about the envy and the bitterness in the hearts of the poor for the rich people. Moving ahead. The rich man just sat back and thought. So now there was a rich man too, and he was sitting back, he sat back and he was pondering over something. Now what was he pondering over? Of the wealth he had in store. So what was there in his mind? He was thinking of the wealth which he has stored in his store, and how to keep what he had earned, and how to safeguard whatever he has earned was there in his mind. From the lazy, shiftless poor. So from whom he had to safeguard? From the unambitious poor people. So here he could only think and of the poor people and how to exploit these poor people. So he was lazily sitting back and he was only wondering about his wealth rather than of his survival. So he could not do anything for the poor. This shows his greediness here. He was stopped by the greed, avarice. By black man's face bespoke revenge. Now there was a black man in whose face it showed his revengeful attitude. As the fire passed from his side, for all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. So the wood would only give him a thought that it is the only chance which he has got to showcase his own superiority and how to demean the rich. So he wanted to take the revenge from the white, from the upper class, and he wanted to show his hatred, and that is the reason why he could not give away his stick. So he denotes hatred. Hatred towards the whites. The last man of this forlorn group, so the lonely group, the last man of this lonely group did not accept for gain. So he did nothing except for gain. So he had this attitude of give and take. He only knew that relationship. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. So he would only give to who would give him. And this was the game which he would play in life. So he shows lack of generosity. Now, in the end, their logs held tight in the death-still hand. So all of them were holding the logs in their hands, in their dead-still hands, was proof of human sin. So the theme which I was talking about, the proof of human sin. So this is how the logs in their hand was symbolic of their sin. They did not die from cold without, they died from cold within. So all these men, they did not die because of the cold weather outside, but they died because of the coldness in their hearts for each other. So the poet here tries to bring home the message that the coldness in our hearts is fatal. We must avoid that. Further, the poet is also suggesting that each one of them had those logs in their hand, but none of them could renounce sinning, none of could renounce their unkind nature, and that was the reason of their tragic death. So the poem is a powerful reminder that if we selfishly hold on to the world's resources and we discriminate on any of the grounds, we all will be lost. So it is on to us that what do we want? We want destruction in the world or we want fruitfulness in the world. So the poem also reminds us to overcome our personal demons and to open to all the wisdoms and views of egalitarian society. By egalitarian society, I mean seeing everybody equal. We will have to accept the fact that all of us are human beings and we are no one to discriminate amongst ourselves when the Almighty has made us one and the same. Nobody is different from anybody. I hope you liked the video. If you did so, please give it a thumbs up, like, share and comment. Thank you very much.